Thank you for joining me. Let's take some time this morning. I know it's a bit early, but look over all the fun that you can do with the editor. Now, as I mentioned, really anything that you see within Voces, we give you the same tools that we use to build it in order to go in and make changes. So you're able to edit any of that, and there is a lot. I could spend the entire day just going over all the little details of what you can get done with the editor and different examples, etc. So with that said, let's just look at the basics, as we've only got a few minutes here. Sorry about that. That's my alarm going off. Anyhow, with that said, let me get screen share going here and we will dive right in. Okay, so there are a couple of ways that you can reach the editor for any page once you have logged in. Good starting point is if you are already on the page that you would like to make changes to, simply scroll all the way down to the bottom and hit this Manage This Page button. So what that's going to do is it will dive you into the editor and it will take you right to that page in your table of contents for you. And it'll have it highlighted so that you're ready to go. You can just click on that page options and see everything that you can do. But another way that you can reach it, if you are looking for all the tools at once instead of just a specific page, is by going to the teachers panel here and then editor, and that will start you off at the very top. Now, all the way up to the top, we've got a couple of extra buttons here that can be useful. First up is just the save button, which is something that you're going to want to hit every time that you finish making your changes. It just is the save button so that everything actually stays. Manage My Pages is a nice button for keeping track of what you have and have not changed. If I click there, it will have a list of all the pages that you've created or edited. And if you look at this linked to box here, it tells you where you put them, which is really helpful for tracking down any pages that you're like, oh, what did I call that? Um, so if I just come down here and say add page, I can give a new page a name, such as just, and then when I say add an existing page, I'll be able to choose any of those pages that I had in that list over at Manage My Pages, if it's not already in use, to add it into my book. Once that finishes, I'll see that there it's listed right there for me, and I can keep track of where I put all of my pages. I can also quickly make copies and reach the editing options here. Now, one more button up there at the top is the reset. Think of that like restore to factory default. So use with caution. But note that it will reset everything back to the original versions of Voces. And it doesn't actually delete anything. It just moves them all out back to manage my pages so that you can add them back in again later. So with the basic organization tools uh, established, if I open up any section and look at any page, there's a couple of options here in the editor as well. I can drag and drop things to quickly reorganize. So maybe I want to say cover a topic later in the year. I can go just drag and drop that to a different chapter, different section, etc. if needed. On any of those section options or page option buttons, I have a number of tools right here as well. I can change the name of the page. I can change whether the page as a whole is marked teacher only or not. So if you recall what Justin was saying yesterday about how those pages that have the apple on them just don't appear at all for the students unless you assign them, I can toggle that on or off here as well. And nice thing about that is I don't have to go through and do each page at a time. I can just do the entire section. If, say, I want to make the entire section teacher only and hide it, so For a good example, if I wanted to make my integrated performance assessment here, my test hidden, I can hide just the section level and I don't have to hide each individual page. Also, and I'll dive into that a little bit more later. A nice one here is the share button. Gets you over to the sharing library, lets you copy pages from book to book, share it with your colleagues, etc. I'll look in that in more detail at the end. But the big one today that we're going to focus on a lot is the edit page contents button here. So when I first hit edit page contents, it will pop up asking me to give my page that I'm making changes to a new name. So I'll be able to find it easily later and manage my pages and tell it apart from all those other pages that I've made changes to. Um, from there, you'll see a preview of the page over here on the left and all of your editing options over on the right. So there's a couple of major ones to hit on. First up, if you want to add just a completely new section of content here, you're going to want to use either create a new block or copy a block. Create a new block is just going to let you start fresh. And there are many, many templates here under block type that you can choose from. So content only is just going to give you a blank content box that you can add anything that you would like to. Student recording is for audio response, spoken response activities. Photo capture lets your students take pictures. Full with text entry is going to be written response. You also have specialized items for things like slideshows or interactive video activities, etc. So that with those many different templates, different options will appear depending on which template you choose. So that's part of why this can take a really long time if I go through all the little nuances. Um, with that said, once I make a choice here, I'll see a example question posted so that I know what it's going to look like once it shows up on the left. And I can add directions for the section as a whole. This is where you would want to add something like answer each question with complete sentences, or make sure to read the directions before answering, that sort of thing. It's also where you can leave additional information that students are going to use for all of the questions, like maybe a brief transcript of your video, or if I click on this button here, even the video itself. So as I've got a text box here handy, let's just look at what options I can use with those text boxes. Of course, you have your standard text editing tools, anything that you're used to with most standard text editors, like say Google Sheets or Word, etc. But I can also start recording audio. I can choose to add a pre-recorded file from my computer. I believe it requires it to be MP3. Or I can simply use my microphone to start recording a new recording there. So if I just continue talking and then hit stop, I'll get a preview that I can listen to before I choose to add it into my my page. I can choose to add a picture to the page, whether that be by uploading a file from my computer. It accepts, I know, PNG, JPEG as file formats, but I can also choose to grab it from a URL, website. I can do things like add alt text for students if needed, a detailed description, which is if you look at, for example, any of those pages where we are introducing the countries and it has that tiny little eye icon in the bottom right corner, I can add those sort of descriptions here. It also lets me get larger versions of the pictures, as it'll do that pop-up so that I see the entire picture instead of just a little screenshot. Um, if I choose this button, I can insert links to other pages if needed. I can also, as I mentioned, add videos. Please note that we don't have an option for recording the video directly. Instead, your video will need to be uploaded to one of the sites listed here. So usually the more popular ones are YouTube, Vimeo, or Loom, but you can add videos from any of those sites here. And then, as I mentioned, you'll have additional tools down here, just depending on which type of block, which template you chose. I will look at a few more of those in more detail in a moment. Let's click the Create Block button, and I'll see that got added all the way down to the bottom. One more thing that I can do just while I am looking at these tools right here is I can drag and drop things to rearrange them in my list. So if I say wanted to create a new section that's all the way up to the top, I would start by creating it, and then I can just drag and drop it all the way up to the top. It will by default be added to the bottom. So there's one more way that you can go about creating an entirely new section, and that's using the Copy a Block button here. What that will do is it will allow you to look across your book and find a existing set of questions, content, materials, etc., that you can then add in. Uh-oh. Uh, um, Let me test that with a different book real quick.
You just had to do that in German, didn't you?
Well, I also think that function kind of takes a long time to load, especially in a Zoom meeting. So,
It does, and so it could be that. It could also be because German is set up a little bit differently than the other ones. It might be trying to load something differently.
That'll do. Let me try that again. There we go. Now it's working. Okay, so you choose the chapter that the section is currently in, you choose the page that it's on, and then you choose which section that you would like to add. And to make sure that you grab the section that you want, it'll give you a quick preview here before you choose to then add that block to your page. Once more, it'll be added all the way down to the bottom, and you can drag it and drop it into place. Um, so those are a bunch of different ways to add completely new sections. If you want to add new content to those sections, so new questions, new videos, audio, new vocabulary lists, all those different things that you see throughout the book, you'll want to click on the corresponding Add Edit button in the list here. So if I click on, let's look at a multiple choice question again, just so that we're being consistent. If I look at a set of multiple choice questions here, I'll get the option to either make changes to any existing question, create a new question, or once again, copy from an existing set of questions. So that copy option will work just like we've seen before. Create new lets you start from scratch with a completely new question. I will point out a nice little trick here in a moment that lets you actually start with a template. Um, you'll see that once again, because those section types, those block types are templates, you'll have different options here depending on which block type you choose. So if I just hop back out real quick and look at a written response set of questions here instead, I will see that I have a different set of options available right from the start. I wanted to go one more step back. There we go. Couple of different tools to look at within this. First up, yes, you can add once more a text that you would like. You can go in, change your answer key. You can add additional options. by clicking on any of those plus buttons. For multiple choice, it adds more options like A, B, C, D. For written response, it adds more accepted answers to your answer key. You can also choose for various section types. So multiple choice, sorting, matching, shorter written response, most of those quick activities that you can think of, we can auto grade them for you. If you click this button to make it auto graded, another option here is make this a model. What that will do for you is it sets, I'm going to grab the first one here as an example instead. If I choose to make that one a model and hit save, it's going to make it so that that question is already answered for your students and shows up at the top as an example of how that question is supposed to be answered. So you can do that not just with your directions at the start, but you can also set up example questions for your students using make this a model button. If I I did already step out. If I step back out to the main editor page, both the edit block button here for any section and the edit page details button are another place that you can go to play around with templates. So under edit block, as I mentioned, we'll look at some of those other options here in a moment. I have the place where I can edit those directions, but I can also go through and change certain template options. I can change, say, a multiple choice block into a survey so that it's not actually grading the questions, and students will see a preview of what the pie chart, what the percentages of each question were chosen at the end. I can choose to randomize my list of questions within the block so that each student sees a different random set. Please note that that will be randomized again every time the page is refreshed. So if the student starts a new try, they'll get a new random set. I can choose to set a question limit. What that does is it treats this set of questions over here like a question bank instead of a full question list. So 0 says just use all the questions, but I see I've got 4 questions here. If I set that to 3, then and set this to randomize, what it will do is it will grant a random set of 3 questions, a different random set of 3 questions for each student, grabbing from this question bank. I can also do things like change my default number of points that each question is worth. You can change that later using the assignment tool if you would like. I've got different options for how this page appears, such as do I want my little circular radio buttons or do I want larger buttons if needed, a 2x2 grid, etc., different layouts. You'll see once more different options depending on your section type. So let me, do I have, we'll just use longer written response once more. So here we have standard entry. We once again have question limit, but you see that the survey option isn't there anymore, for example. So those are a lot of the tools that are available within the edit block. You also have the edit page details. So first up, this lets you change the name of the page again. If you would like to go back and change that name that you gave it at the start so you could find it within that manage pages section. You can also here make changes to the rubric. I know that we looked at that a little bit the other day, but here I can change whether it's graded on points or a rubric. I can add new criteria, create my own rubric from scratch by typing in. Please note that any section that you leave blank will be automatically removed once you save this. I can add new sections, save this as a template so that I can quickly apply it to other pages later. I don't just have to use our built-in templates. We do, of course, have all of the rubrics that we use throughout the book available to you, as well as some from other levels. So I can quickly grab my interpersonal writing template that's going to be based off of those ACTFL World Readiness Standards and apply it to this page. I also have a couple of little template options here, such as show one block at a time and shuffle block order. What that'll do is it will either A, make each of those sections, not just the questions within the sections, but the blocks, the sections as a whole, appear in a random order each time that the page is loaded, so that really students get a completely randomized test, say. The show one block at a time changes it into a system sort of like a slideshow. Students will have to click the next section button to go from one section to another. One more important thing to take note of is the save button. Your changes do not stay unless you hit save. So as you're going through, you might want to hit that save button often just to make sure that you don't lose any work. But if you choose that you don't want to keep things, you can just say close page editor and hop back out. Alrighty, so that was a lot of the tools that we can play around with and make changes with. I want to highlight two more things in general, and then, oh, I am running a bit close on time, so I'll hit those quickly. First up, I showed briefly the option to add a new page. Let's look at the option to add a new blank page. Because one thing that you can do that can make things a little bit more interactive with your students with the Game Center is I can choose to change this option here from standard activity. Most pages that you use will be standard activity because that has a lot of the different section types, the block types, those templates that I talked about. If I change it over to embedded game, I'll get a new set of block types that let me use games from the Game Center instead. Note that that's an instead. Not all of those block types will be available on an embedded game page. But once I do that, when I go to add a new block, I'll see some of those different game types from the Game Center added here. I say create block. When I go to add my question, I know it says add questions to a game, but when I go to add question, that's when you will be able to choose your game settings that the students have to use when they play the game. When I add it, it will be added to my page that I can then use with my students. Okay, so the other thing that I wanted to highlight quickly is the page, rather the sharing library. We looked at that briefly. Let's look at that a little bit more in detail. If I choose to make this page available to other teachers, I can come to the editor, find that page, click on page options, and then share. First thing that I'll do is it'll pop up with this asking for a name for that page so that teachers can find it quickly in the sharing library list, and a brief description so that teachers know what they're going to be looking at. I can then also choose whether to make this publicly available or keep it private using this little checkbox. So the default is public. I can keep it private, and there we go. Once I've added it, it will show up as Chris showed over here in the sharing library. He pointed out a lot of those tools for if you are just looking at the sharing library. So I can go and I can sort by which book I'm looking at, all of them within the language. So I get a lot more materials available. I can see ratings. If I hit preview content, there's this little eye icon next to each of the pages that I can preview that will let me take a look at what's going to be on that page. and then I can use use this content. I hit that a little bit early button in order to add it into my book. And the drop-down menus let me choose exactly where I want to add it to my book, from the chapter, the section, and then the exact page, if needed. But the other thing that I should point out is the My Shared Content section. What that will do is it will let you go in, change the name and description if you need, stop sharing that page if you no longer want it to be public, preview it again if you want to say, oh, which page was that I shared? But an important thing here is if you made this private, or if you want to copy it to another book, you have that direct share ID or that share to specific emails button. So if I share it to specific email, it will send them a link with that little direct share ID. If I just copy this share ID here and go back to the library, I'll see there's a search box here that lets me search by that share ID that I copied. So it's not by title, it's by that little number code. I then hit preview and it pulls it up just like if I had hit preview from the sharing library. I can look at my different pages and add it to my book. But a nice thing about that is if I want to move pages from one book to another, that share ID works across books. So if I hop back over to German, no, I'm joking. So if I hop over to say level 3 instead of level 1, I wanted library, there we go. And then paste that here again, I'll see that still pulls up the same content. Okay, I think I've hit my time limit. I wanted to leave a little bit of space for questions, but instead I will have to say thank you all for joining me. We definitely have that survey available. If you have any questions that we didn't hit on in the chat, add them to the survey, and I will be happy to cover them later at 1. I'm going to stop here so that I don't run into the next person's time.